Hi everyone. We are Adaptive City. I'm June. Here's Stanley and here's Tao. So as urbanization is accelerating with more people moving to cities, leading to changes in building functions, the question is whether cities can adapt fast enough when lifestyle demands surpass building adaptability, abandonment occurs. Our thesis introduced the concept of an adaptive city, one that evolved with its people. This map shows roughly the area of ghost town, preserved historic places, and under-occupied development spreading around the world. Abandonment often results from economic shifts, such as Detroit decline due to the collapse of its auto industry. Overconstruction is another cause. Ordos, China overbuilt infrastructure with minimal use. And environmental disaster like Chernobyl left Pripyat uninhabited. Policy failure like Varosha, Cyprus also contribute. As an architect, our goal is to design cities that evolve and avoid abandonment. In creating a prototypical city, we focus mainly on addressing key issues of economic shift and overconstruction. We aim to develop the system that can adapt to these changes, ensuring the city emerges to be resilient and responsive to the future demand. Tokyo is an example of emerging city. After the 1950s, it rapidly grew with building following a 30-year life cycle to meet modern standards, addressing high land values, earthquake code, and modernization needs. Tokyo also features adaptive structure like Zakkyo buildings, which house mixed-use space, adapting to urban needs over time. The diagram shows how this building evolved vertically while retaining the same footprint to maximize space.
So we are aiming to explore the idea of cities that temporary and physical while permanent as a system. Cities as a container for many human beings would be able to cope with the potential natural disasters and the social context change. That's how the word homeostasis described. And to achieve this dynamic balance, the building should be enough flexibility to deal with the potential change, and also the time plays an important role in this process. The change will be based on the last second and influence the next second. Our research outline will include two branches, urban AI and building system. In the first branch, we are exploring the simple rules of urban growth and logic of function switch in city. While for the building branch, we are exploring the system that bring the energy into the building and allow the change happen. So in our first chapter, our urban morphology are inspired by how the cells just follow the basic behavior that's recorded in their DNA and aggregated into very complex creatures. Our previous research is about how to use global field to control the growth, and we explore how the different behavior that what we input that change the output pattern. And then we want to push this simulation into a more realistic approach. We start to think about how these cells behave in real cities, and also what will the buildings behavior in the cells. So we set different behaviors of both cells and buildings, and they are influenced by previous stage, and transfer their properties to sub-elements. Using their behaviors and just the initial conditions, the city can grow itself. So we are exploring the two approach at first. No, sorry.
So from the old time, Canary Wharf was So for the site, we chose Canary Wharf. From the old time, Canary Wharf was a dockyard that played a major role in global trade, which lasted until 1960, when the dock fell into decline. In the late 1980s, the area was redeveloped into a modern financial hub. Skyscraper like One Canada Square in 1991 symbolized this phase, attracting major banks and financial institutions. However, due to the low vacancy rate, Canary Wharf is adapting itself again by adding more residential development and becoming an integrated neighborhood with entertainment, shopping, and parks. This mixed-use approach aims to reduce reliance on office tenants as hybrid work and changing market conditions challenge traditional financial district. Here in this chart, you can see that the vacancy rate of Canary Wharf office is high, and it goes as much as like 50%. From this information, we know that like this, although it try to change or adapt, but it's not fast enough, and people will still move forward. So that's why we want to try to integrate our building system into Canary Wharf to see how would it go.
So at first, we are exploring two approach. We first try to use only vector field to control the growth, and we also input the existing grid, which gives a more top-down result. So now we're choosing a middle way to use the field to control the growth, and at the same time, we input the infrastructure to influence the boundary of the pattern. So to put the building inside the district, we use the logic of diffuse to get enough distance and create the main circulation of the building. For mid and high density zone, we are using 3 basic floor plate, and this floor plate will also give us some freedom to change the function later. For the low density zone, we are trying to merge different circulation to create a continuous footprint. And this is our urban simulation based on the rules we talked before.
For our urban morphology, we learned from Tokyo on how they have hybrid building with convenient walking network for people that greatly increase the accessibility for most of the buildings. The buildings are connected in 3D space and become 3D alleyway of the city. This type of network draw inspiration for us to connect our building in 3D space visually. Here we introduce the line network that will carve out part of the building to retain the relation of urban space with our building blocks. This line will emerge from both global and local rules. The global rules is that the 3D network will try to connect themselves, point to the city center, or in this case, the green space, while locally the line will open the ground area of the building to create an opening facing in or out of the street adjacent to the parcel. The red line here shows the 3D connection coming out of the border of the parcel in space while attracting to the green area as mentioned. This line then translates into the low poly surface to be ready to carve out of the building, which will give each building characteristic in relation to the urban surrounding. Here's the example of the carved out cluster of the parcel with the bullet line. And this line shows the growth of that 3D network that would connect the building blocks together while carved out.
So another issue we noticed that in city skyline abandonment also happened, and they have an algorithm to evaluate. The evaluate system are based on different functions, while the only way to use the abandoned line is to demolish them. So for our dynamic system, we are trying to allow them to change the function based on a simple rules. So we will have 2 kinds of agent at first, and first is construction agent, and next one is openness agent. Within the construction agent, we subdivide them into different functions. So we will evaluate the score of each unit, and if the number is lower than a certain number, they will try to sell their unit to another agent. And if another agent can get a higher score here, they will be willing to take it. While the green and openness agent is a special rule. The construction agent trying to sell their floor to openness agent because they can create a gap between different functions and improve the quality what they are remain. And the score, the evaluation system are based on this function matrix and the distance and the height function. So that's the way we evaluate the score of each unit in our urban simulation. And we are able to see that from the output, each unit I get like a little bit higher score than the previous one. And we also set different matrix for the simulation, and they will give us like different kind of output. And this is a way that we can control how to influence different function in the urban level.
So we first tested the Boolean between a primitive geometry and a hypothetical pipe from a different set of curved network to see the possibility of geometry we could get. We actually mean the geometry based on the different number of line connections from 2 to 5 that cut through the building at which point are moved within a given bound. The radius of the pipe at each node also affect the outcome. And from this, we select a result that has more than 65% of the volume left, which will be the functional space. And after that, we study the cut and try to put structure in it. So here we try to use the Boolean line with our building geometry from the shape grammar. For the low density, we have 3 core and 2 core accordingly. So for this cut, we categorize into 3 types. The first one is to cut at the top, which will create skylight. And the next one is the side. This could bring out the opening and could also make a balcony. The third one is the cut through, which could create the bridge in between within the building space. And the next one is the mix between any of those types. And this will follow the same rules. And you can see that with different type of geometry, it will also create a unique type of space within. For the medium density part, we use the cut line with slightly different logic. So here is like the 2 cut line that will carve out the building to create an opening, or the 3 cut line Y shape that will create some facade for the building, and 1 line or cut through as well. Here is the line that go from 2 buildings together that pair up and cut with the same line here. Yeah.
Okay, so to meet the needs of the rapid functional changes in the urban system, we have introduced a mega truss system. At the top of the building, we set up a mega truss. When there is a need for cantilevering, the vertical loads are transferred upward to the mega truss by means of high tensile steel column in the form of a suspension system. And then the loads are transferred to the foundation through the core. So besides the beam system, removable beams are connected to the core, which means that the height of the internal space can be changed to satisfy the need. And so this beam and column structure can help to enable the building to adapt to different functions over time more efficiently.
So here is when the function come in. For this example is the low density building. We try to see that for each function, each floor type will create a different space. So here for the residential of the ground floor, it will create some reception space that try to bring people up to the main space. So as well as the office, but the office space will have like a taller ceiling, and the commercial will create a feature that try to bring everyone upward. Here is the truss floor, which he mentioned before. So for the residential, this is for the office and commercial accordingly. This one is the upper floor that have a smaller floor plate. For the residential, it will become a bigger unit type. And for the office, it would be the where people meet and chat. And here's the commercial space. So our thought for the low density is the mixed scenario that not every building will have one function, but the function will come out of each core. Yeah. So for example, this is where commercial and office meet, and at different level, it will create a different space with different function. And here's some representation of what we think our space will look like with the Boolean line. This is the cut-through type. This is the ground opening that I talk about. And here is the bridge in between. And when the Boolean happen, it will create a public space and bring people together.
Okay, for medium and high density buildings, in the same logic, the floors are divided into like ground floor, Boolean floor, and truss floor. For the ground floor, since it is not affected by the Boolean part, it is also a default layout form in itself. Residential areas often require less dips, meaning the more atrium can be placed around the core for the light. At the same time, due to the height release, the residential area will often divide into like 3 floors. On the contrary, the office area needs more dips. At the same time, we have placed larger like multi-store opening space. In a commercial space, it would become a ramp thus spiral upwards. The space would become more flexible and various. Next are the floors affected by the Boolean. We think that these types of floor will have more open space. The Boolean tends to create a more interesting opening space from our mind. Although it reduces the use of room, it will improve the overall user's experience. So in the office space, the space near the edge of the Boolean often becomes a space for the communication, and the layout of the room often changes accordingly. So in the commercial space, the Boolean part brings a pure public space designed to give a sense of breakout space in a large, high ceiling space. Since the building itself is a medium or high density space, which normally will be like 132 meters tall, the mega truss is like 12 meters high. In addition, the truss layer serves as a structure layer. We also want to have its like primary function. So this is the residential one, office one, and the commercial one. Okay, so these are the scenario of our medium and high density buildings. And this is the facade of the cut-through building. And this is what we want to show. We use the grade to describe the surface of the Boolean part. And for residential functions, we want to use like separate balconies as a symbol to show it function. And also we have like the between like each functional part, we have a green space to have like breakout feeling. And this is another type of the single core building. So this is the inner part of the office area. So we tend to have like a two-story opening space. This is the overview of our city, the bird view.
Okay, yeah.
And now for our presentation.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for listening.
Okay, so here's our physical module of our team. So these are all the like the previous study about our morphology case study. So like we start from the like seal-like thing, and we try to make it a more regular shape, like more regular and more normal geometry. So become to this is gonna become the last iteration of our city. So the first layer is like the vector field, and this is like the scalar field, and this is show how our like cell expansion, and this is like the result of our like game logic. And this is the final geometry of our city. And yeah, this is like we try to use the sorry. So this is we try to use our Boolean logic into a parcel and try to see how it's going to look like. This is a low density geometry part, and this is the medium and high density geometry part. This is the details of our. This is the details model. We want to show how structure and like how the functional area react to each other. So the first layer is like the truss floor, and this is like residential. So for residential, we want to create like for the area that near to the Boolean part, we want to create more opening space, which we think is more interesting. And then also the functional, like the rooms near the Boolean part will also like for example like this one, because they are too small, so they will like merge together. So, and this is also the part how we got our grid line of our facade. So at first we try to because of the result of the Boolean, most facade will be like double curve. So we first try to use like contour line to describe the surface, and then we try to use asymptotic line, and then we also try to use like timber to assemble that. But we found that it's really in a high tension, so we try to low poly all the mesh and to have our like facade iteration. Yeah, that's all for physical module.
Hi. Hello. So yeah, congratulations. It's such a beautiful project, and I love the way each building looks super unique, and it really does kind of bring a specialness to the buildings, and then the fact that connects the city. It's really cool because you went from one unique building to one unique part of the city. So I'm sure a lot of the people that practice here know that when you start with a skyscraper, the first thing you do is you build an envelope of what the city allows you to build. And that envelope is guided by rights of lights and privacy. So I think, I mean, maybe I missed this part in the presentation, but what would be cool is if the pipe that you're bullying into this city was actually guided by city ordinance, rights of lights and privacy or whatever. And because, when you're working with a developer, they're really small thinking. They're not like big thinking. So you almost have to convince them that subtracting area is actually adding value. Trust me, I do this day and night, So because as designers, we love volume. We love double height space. We love the grand gesture that this pipe is building. But in a way, again, I'm always thinking of concepts and then making them real. A really great way to convince people, like, we gotta subtract this area, which is equivalent to like, whatever, 100,000 square feet or something, is by saying that uniqueness is actually giving more rights of light and privacy to that building there, which you also own, because I imagine you've got the same developer going across this whole swath of land, and then that starts to create a story and give everybody like, a better view or a better connection, or it's like you have to convince people why you're subtracting volume. It's a game. Like I'm playing it all the time, because unfortunately real estate's still driven by price per square foot. They don't quite get why we don't want to copy paste all the way up and make, square towers everywhere. But I think it's very poetic and it's beautiful, and given the right story to sell, it could be very plausible. This could be your next, this could be your next urban planning idea.
Thank you. I think it's really impressive that you managed to go from the master plan scale down to the detail here on the other end. And it's really a lot of work, and congratulations for spanning the whole dimension. I mean, from moving from one to the other scale. The thing that really interests me the most is that you're simulating both scales, right? There's a simulation on an urban scale happening that you're manipulating, and then there's simulations happening on the almost on the detail level, right? When you design the structure of your buildings, and I think to your point, the interesting thing to explore is that all these tools that we have today, they just cover certain amounts, right? But in reality, for those tools to become practically applicable in real life, one would have to add all of those parameters that you just mentioned, right? And including the commercial reality of a developer's mindset, and all the regulations but I think it's a really interesting way to show the potential, or the direction of travel where we are heading. And congratulations for having created all of that in that short amount of time.
I want to just briefly come in on this point. We actually do this tower in Shenzhen where there's bizarre rights of light conditions slice through the building diagonally and around, and it generates something which in the end we have to also make sense in another way. I wouldn't I would try to sell it on its actual merit, by the way. And it's interesting that this feature of the Boolean, these kind of continuous subtractions, take on the project fully and becomes the dominant theme, and that's good and that's fair, and I think it's quite original and it works quite well. And for me, of course, the thing is that this ties together the district. In other respects, these towers could be quite different. They all share this, and this is some kind of programmatic, mid-level and up or down level public spaces, public entrances, lobby spaces, voids, sky lobbies, and they're aligned and tied together across the district, and it gives district identity in a robust way, even if the other facades could be quite diverse, residential, office, commercial, etc. And I think that is really striking and a beautiful idea and powerful idea. So that's, for me, carries the project. I forgot everything else which goes on in the project. That is it for me, and sometimes that happens.
Very challenging. I've worked with George Jacobescu, the head of Canary Wharf, for 10 years. And he never dared give us a building. He was terrified of what we do, so we just had an enjoyable time with him. And the problem was packing everything in. And the issue of, what's my office life? My office life is I'm on the 14th floor, and I'm looking at another 14th floor immediately opposite, and that's the total of my life view. So this notion of Boolean sculpted space running through the building is very interesting, because it allows you to pack in different ways, and I think it opens opportunities that the standard floor plan doesn't. And that's a very worthwhile exploration. And I subscribe to all the other comments about working with developers, as we've done over time. It's a complicated business, but it's fascinating. I'll come back in a minute.
Well, I think the topics that you touch on are, one, very interesting, second, very challenging. I think many have used. I think the adaptability of towers, something that I don't see how that, you mentioned all of it, how Tokyo has evolved, changed your views. I really didn't get how you went into that in your design, but I think, similar to Patrick, I think I agree with those merits, but I think I saw it as an idea of weaving a Hyde Park through a new development in 3 dimensions, right? But then I didn't get the logic of how you are creating that sort of 3-dimensional public space that erodes towers and creates public space. How is that creating different ways of orientation in your master plan, of, as Daria said, adding value to your properties, It's not clear to me how this sort of Boolean comes with a very clear logic that you will really create that value for the new development. It seems as a nice architectural facade differentiation, that you do create different uses through these very clear facade changes. But I think the overall logic that you do mention, your double network of orienting the master plan, which in these ones, it doesn't really come through. I don't see much order in these volumes. And I was hoping that then your weaving of the Boolean will give that order, you know. But I think I still don't see. I would have liked to see more views of distant views, how you see the Boolean carrying through multiple districts and you see the coherency and why this is exciting, not only as one building, but as a full new part of a city, right? I think that's where the potential is, and that's where I think it lacks that sort of grasp intensity, you know, to really communicate that, oh, I want to live there, I want to be part of that, and I want this developer to really erode that area because it really adds a three-dimensional public space outside and inside of the towers. Yeah?
I just want to add some small thing because that Boolean concept which you offer us, it is huge potential to combine open space and inner space, and that surface in one moment is very fragile, and you show us some kind of net. And in my opinion, it must be the space with the just a little more sophisticated design of the elements. Somehow it is so huge elements, not so fragile as the spaces you offer us in that kind of geometry. So, but the great work, and from morphology research to the details, you are very concentrated on every level.
Okay, thank you, guys. Yeah, I mean, this. I don't want to necessarily repeat what they're saying. I think there is an element about the Boolean that I found interesting. Were the drawings in which you show the lines, which then create the subtraction, right? They look like a network, no? So they're not isolated line, but you're kind of simulating them as a network that cuts through the massing. And I was wondering whether you have kind of explored what properties this network may have, like whether it's, you know, about air or whether it's about other form of flow that you enable, because then of course it means that the surface that you are exposing, you know, may have different properties, which of course may actually lead to different type of functions or different type of material solutions and so on, right? So I think that's in a way I think a possibility that you could think of further. And also, if we bring that back to the beginning of your presentation, I think that something I haven't understood, you start the presentation showing an issue with empty blocks, right? With abandoned blocks, right? And so at some point I was thinking that you would bring everything back to that point and essentially discuss this as a kind of methodology to perhaps reinvent or reimagine those, you know, empty shells, which are empty, like you said, because they are potentially been overbuilt or their original use has, you know, fallen out or moved somewhere else. And have you thought about this? Have you thought about how this kind of Boolean notion may work not only in new build, but also as a strategy to re-engineer those unused or underused or obsolete blocks?
Yeah, we have thought about doing the Boolean on the existing tower of Canary Wharf where it's vacant. Like HSBC, they have a vision that you could carve out some space because from office it could turn into residential, and it's like the Boolean can help reducing that gap between the core and the floor. Like it made the floor plate like make more sense with that. Yeah, so we will we will have to like how to say. I mean.
Because I mean, there is an interesting similarity with the worms we saw before. Like it's almost like you're kind of projecting that into a kind of whole new scenario of existing structures, which would be super fascinating.
Yeah.
Very briefly, I mean, that idea of going through the existing would be very strong and would really continue the network. And it would also show that this thing is quite robust and can connect up and integrate quite diverse objects, like a smoothing agent or integrating agent. I think there was some studies earlier also where what you've done is you can make these booleans and then you project it back actually area like balconies or gardens, etc., and occupiable surface, and that would still work. It was quite nice, and I thought, again, when you look at this together, it still works, it still carries through, even though you refill that void. And I think where I agree with Paolo on the exterior somehow, we don't get a sense, but maybe that's okay. But where it really worked, when you make the fly-throughs following the network, and these little fly-throughs, when they flash up, that's where it works for me, where it really connects 3-4 buildings in a trajectory. And yeah, but whereas these studies where you kind of went back, they actually were quite successful, and you were commended for it. So I don't know why they disappeared.
Yeah, I mean, I think like all the comments on the Boolean is very, great to see that you can hold the conversation on a kind of very formal and design-oriented aspects of the project as much as the procedural breadth and the fact that you can almost real-time. Most of these things are real-time simulated. Which is not evident in the videos, which are kind of post-processed, but like the fact that you innovated in the use of Blender, and like most of these are kind of updating. All of these, I think, like this disparity, or like the fact that you can do both the procedural aspects at the urban scale and at the building scale and the fabrication aspect. At the same time, also hold reasonable amount of conversation around the formal aspect, the compositional aspects. Like, to me, is super exciting as a proto project of something that can, as a beacon for all the coming projects, right? Like in the next generation of projects, where like it's starting to bring together many of the things that we have in isolation developed over the many years here in the DRL, right? Like some aspects from parametric urbanism, some aspects from like building scale, some aspects from robotic fabrication, things that like we had done like maybe 5-6 years ago. So even though it's not fully mature, like the fact that you could have brought it back to address a solution, provide a solution to the problem you state, which is a grave problem, really, like of ghost cities and or monofunctional cities. Despite saying that, like I think there's a lot of maturity in the way you're bringing together design aspects and also procedural aspects across scale. So I commend you on that, and like to me it's very exciting. Like I learned a lot from like just observing you do these things, and gives me the confidence for the next generation of projects to like really start aiming higher and higher, right? And so I also thank you for trying to cohere all of these very ambitious, very many ambitions, let's say. Yeah, thank you.
I mean, I think a lot has been said, and I think that the team has come a long way in terms of kind of putting us in a position to have this conversation. I do think that, the Boolean is a conversational topic because thematically it has some conceptual underpinnings that can be, I think, recursively used at different scales with different interpretations. I think the thing about the performativity of the building, the environmental control systems of this building, things that you can see in tower, innovation and things like that, I think are things that you guys can start to problematize maybe a little bit more, like look for the opportunities of what it actually means beyond, let's say, the formal coherency or the things that, Patrick and Sajay are speaking to. I think that, these kind of projects are proto-projects because I don't know if you truly believe you're going to redesign the city this way, or that you see it as an incremental and adaptive modeling apparatus that you could really be in dialogue with London. So Ghost City as a generic sense of the world, I mean, to be honest with you, we don't need all of the advancement to engage that. Hypersensitive lived cities that are very responsive to change, we like it or we don't like that change, I think is important to try to see like how you guys can utilize this logic to really try to kind of enable people to actually think a little bit differently. One way of looking at this kind of thing is that you're versioning different options so that we can have a more informed conversation. So I think let's call it creative reuse, which is a big subject matter for a lot of people, is becoming creative because it's being forced that we reuse buildings. And it's a good forced conversation because I think it's an important one to demonstrate. So I think the thing that Patrick was mentioning that you didn't focus on is, I think, as important as the new build, or maybe potentially even more important for your own careers. Like, you go through this process, we've gone through the research, we're taking stock of where you've achieved. Sajay on his own is going to be taking, his own stock in terms of where the studio is going. But I think we should be looking for opportunities to actually understand that, the goal isn't to design 50 towers and 50 mega blocks. For some people it may be, but for others, I think the reality of that stuff is that that's definitely not London. That's not London. So the fact that this is situated in London also has very different pressures. And I think those pressures are important to also look at the visualization and all of this and not to see it as a traditional blueprint, master plan logic, to see it time-based. And I think the more that you guys can have that conversation in a very real way, I think the better it is. But I do think that it does have to have this thematic underpinning, and that's why Boolean became a word that a lot of people gravitated towards. And I think it's an important one, but I think you should really try to give it definition to the different types of problems you could somehow conceptualize it through. So when we're looking at these models or a facade system or whatever, we can start to really see the complexity of what the potential of looking at that from a different point of view is. So I think you guys have done a good job to kind of illustrate that. I'm not as sold with the one-to-one correlation that a Boolean means glass and everything else looks like a normal building. I think that, but these are not necessarily criteria, that's just personal preference from my perspective. But I just think like this one-to-one issue, I think, needs to be challenged, and you guys, I think, should be looking at other people's work. I mean, Foster's design for the Gherkin, and how that sort of operates as a climactic control system and all of these things. There's a lot of knowledge that I think you can also bring into the way that you think how these buildings are going to operate, how they're going to be powered, how people are going to utilize them. I think that it's an opportunity for the studio and for you guys in particular to look how you've gotten to, what are the real qualities that are coming through, and how that can be operationalized. I think it's a good conversation. It's a good way to close the morning session. We're going to pick up in 45 minutes to continue with another 3 projects. And I think the discussion has been good, so congratulations.